Great to have Frank Scavo today from Computer Economics, good friend and a great analyst. And he's been benchmarking IT spending for, how old are you, 200 years?
Well, I've been doing this almost 20 years, so
Frank,
a lot of water under the bridge.
Great to have you and look forward to this briefing. Thank you.
All right. Well, Vinnie, good to see you. We've been together for many, many years. I remember the first time I met you, it was at a Lawson conference, if you remember.
Oh my God.
I tried to buy you a drink and you said, no, you didn't need to do that. So anyway, I still need to buy you a drink.
I'm getting old. I don't remember that.
It was in San Diego. I remember very clearly.
Okay.
Anyway, as you mentioned, I've been doing IT spending benchmarks for many years, in addition to my work with enterprise software selections and industry analysts and so on. This was with my work with Computer Economics, which we acquired in 2005. And then, as you know, earlier this year, Computer Economics was acquired by Avasant. And so now I continue as the president of Computer Economics, and I am also the president of Avasant Research. And Computer Economics is a service, a part of Avasant Research. So we have a much bigger team now. We got a lot more resources, but we continue to do the same work that we've done for so many years. So what we've got here is, we do an annual IT spending and staffing survey, which the firm has published since 1989, actually, or 1990. And this year, we run this survey every spring. And this year, we started the survey in January, and we're collecting our data. It was looking pretty good. And then right in the middle of the survey period, we got, word that we're under a pandemic, which really threw a monkey wrench into our survey data collection, because we had about half the survey respondents collecting, responding to data before the pandemic, and then half going into the pandemic. So we added a bunch of questions to our survey to catch everybody that was going forward. We went back and resurveyed the other people to answer these supplemental questions, and we came up with some results in the May timeframe that gave us some insight into how IT spending and budgets and staffing were being affected by the pandemic. So we published our metrics, as we usually do, in actually late June, July, and we also published a supplemental report at the same time on the impact of the pandemic, because we know everybody was going to be asking about that. So we gave a webinar last week. You can still watch the whole replay for that on the Avasant website. I'm going to give you a little highlights of that now. If you would like to take the annual survey, this is the link. Vinnie, I hope you can publish that somewhere. You can apply to take the survey. We always need more survey respondents. There's a lot of free research that you get with that. So anyway, like I said, I'm going to give you some highlights right now. So the first thing, people always say, well, during a recession like we are almost certainly in right now, IT spending has got to go down, right? Because people don't have as much money to spend on IT. And they say, of course, then as we all know, IT spending as a percentage of revenue, it's got to go down because people don't have money to spend on IT. Well, actually, our survey goes back to 1990, and I have tracked this for many years, and I'm showing you here where this metric has been. We've been through at least 3 recessions since we started collecting this data. And actually, what we see is that during a recession, IT spending as a percent of revenue actually goes up, right? It went up in the 2000, the so-called tech recession, went through the Great Recession. You can see it went up. And now we're sitting right here on the year 2020. And, we don't know what it's going to do, but we're going to know pretty soon when we get to, our next survey period. So, how can that be? How can IT spending go up during a recession? Well, on a percentage of revenue, you got to remember, it's a numerator and a denominator. The numerator is IT spending, the denominator is revenue. Well, revenues go down, but IT spending can't fall as fast as revenue is falling, so the ratio goes up. And we've seen this now, pretty consistently, and I have no reason to think that this is not going to happen again here. So, the lesson is don't depend upon your intuition. You got to look at the data and see where it's going here. So one of the points we made.
I'm sure the composition changes, right?
It does.
Go ahead. We can talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah, it does, because, and the point I make, I don't think I'm going to make it today on any of these slides, but there's some aspects of IT spending that just are not fungible, right? So cloud spending can go up and can scale, but your software licenses, unless you can get a break from your vendor, you can't, leasing costs that you're already obligated to, floor space and so on, those are not, over the long run, everything is variable, right? But in the short term, you cannot cut some aspects of IT spending. You can fire people, you can lay off people, but you can't, give up, real estate, those kind of things. So IT has a certain amount of fixed costs in it. But let me get on to the, some of the, what happened was, and I should have said this earlier, we did this special survey in May, and we just did it again in like August, September, because we wanted to see what had changed now through the pandemic. How have IT leaders changed their, budgeting now after they've been, 4, 5, 6 months into the pandemic? So the beginning of the year, we were poised for a very good, another 3%, increase in IT budget changes from the prior year. So this is what we're seeing at the beginning of the year. Then in the May survey, we asked IT leaders, how are you changing your IT budgets due to the recession? And most of the respondents said it's too soon to tell. We haven't made any changes. You can see 57% of the respondents said we haven't changed anything yet. It's too early to tell. They were putting discretionary projects on hold, but they're also increasing spending for all this sudden need to support work from home. So organizations that had not done a lot of telecommuting at this point were now having to deploy, large numbers of laptops, VPN connections, additional security, greater network bandwidth, and so on. And, the pandemic response itself was calling for more IT spending. That's why you see even some even 13% back in May were actually increasing their IT budget. Now in August, September, we clearly are seeing a K-shaped recovery. So now our survey respondents, 30% of them are actually increasing their IT spending as a result of the pandemic, with a typical range of 4 to 10% budget increases. You say, hey, how can that be? Well, we'll see about that in a minute. On the other hand, you've got 29%, almost 30% of organizations cutting IT spending in the 5 to 15%. So you look at the top and the bottom of the K, they're almost exactly, mirror images of one another. And then there's this group, 40% in the middle, that are saying we still haven't changed anything. So we said in the webinar, in any time we do this survey, you see some organizations increasing IT spending, some organizations are cutting, with a large group in the middle that are not really making any change at all. This year, it's much more pronounced. Okay, as a result of the pandemic, we've got a divergence. It's a K-shaped recovery in IT spending, just as it is a K-shaped recovery in the general economy, right? So that's the big message that we did not see back in May. So people always say, well, what are the increases for? So still, there's still a large amount of increased budget for work from home, laptops, VPNs, software as a service, networking, expense, and so on. We see, and this is all from the comments, right? So I was reading through the comments, and you see a lot of mentions of security. Now working from home has expanded the security perimeter. So you've got, two-factor authentication, single sign-on, a lot of investments that are being made there. And interestingly, a lot of organizations are, doubling down on their digital transformation projects. Some of those had, paused in the spring, and some of those now are starting back up again. And even things like, ERP selections and upgrades, on the consulting side of our business at Avasant, we saw a lot of those projects being put on hold in May. Well, guess what? We had a huge September. A lot of these projects are starting back up again. So I don't know what you're seeing or our other associates, but they're not all starting up, but a lot of them are. Are you seeing that as well?
Well, you know what I've seen, Frank, and maybe something interesting for your survey next year, is a lot of what I call vertical edge applications. So, someone like Encino took off with PPP loans. 5 million PPP loans were approved. Right. Shopify has done phenomenally well as people look for e-commerce and last mile delivery and so on.
That's right.
Blackboard has taken off in higher education. A lot of these smaller, vendors you and I may not have heard about a year ago.
That's right.
In verticals have taken off. I don't know if it'll make much of a difference to the budgets, but maybe interesting for you to survey that next year.
Well, it does mean a lot for the budgets because that's all new investment. So it's not just keeping the lights on. Companies are saying, we got into this mess, we got to get out and we got to digitize. I mean, they're already heading in that direction toward digital business, right? So they might have been doing 10%, 15% of e-commerce, you know, a retailer or a B2B seller. But now suddenly that's become a major channel. So you can't put that stuff on hold just because business is down. They've still got to make those investments to survive. So those are some themes we saw. In May, we saw a cuts in outsourcing budget.
This is counterintuitive, but go ahead.
Well, back in May, we saw budget cuts for outsourcing, and it was mostly just, you know, belly up to the bar, Mr. Service Provider, we need you to take a haircut, you know, asking for discounts and getting them, right? In some cases, you know, transaction volumes were down, so, you know, there were, you know, escalators or de-escalators in service providers. New project delays, of course, are going to, you know, push out outsourcing. But now 22% are actually increasing their outsourcing budgets, only 10% are cutting them. And the size of the increases are in the 5 to 15% range. So
did you ask
that's seeing a bounce back. What's that?
Did you ask them if they're being done remotely and if they changed the contracting method to more outcome-based versus timesheet-based? Did you ask them?
There's a lot of that going on, and the comments were all over the map on this. I read through them, and you know, your head starts spinning all the different types of. I mean, some of them are being affected by the service providers. Personnel now are working from home, so their costs are going down. You know, all these dots are connected, kind of thing. So there's a lot of movement in the outsourcing service provider relationship. A lot of movements going on here. We'll get another read on this in the spring. I mentioned this just a minute ago, in a reversal from May, now some of those new projects we said were on pause, now they're being restarted. So this is the April, May here on the left. 33% said they were decreasing their new project budgets, only 7% increasing. Now look at the change. Now 29 are decreasing, so not a big change there, but the increasing is 29, unchanged 42. So a lot of IT leaders are getting off the fence and coming down and saying, okay, let's get started again. Many two projects support remote workers for crisis response. Those are still going on, but also restart of projects put on hold. We did see a number of comments on major replacements for ERP, increasing collaboration tools, responding to the current economy, and so on. So projects, I mean, they're not completely back, but definitely healthier than they were just a few months ago.
I suspect one of the ERP ones you're seeing, people had a pretty bad experience with on-premise, you know, needing to do a lot of VPN provisioning and scaling and all that. And they are starting to look for cloud alternatives.
Right.
Whether they'll get there is a different matter, right? Because they require systems integration, they require quite a bit of cost. So
that's right.
Yeah, this makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Those that were already heading that way are now just going there faster. So it's not like, oh, they've been on premises all these years and now suddenly the pandemic is, oh, we got to go to the cloud. You know, no, they've already been thinking about going or planning to maybe in 2021, 2022. And I was like, let's accelerate that because we got to get there quicker, right? And those, as we've seen, that are already there, we had some research respondents said, you know, this pandemic didn't affect us at all. We were already 100%, you know, not 100%. We're already largely in the cloud. We also already could support remote workers. It was just a matter of picking people up and putting them somewhere else, and not a big deal. Others had a much bigger, you know, need to respond to that. So like we've been saying is that the pandemic didn't change the trajectory of the current trends. It just accelerated them, right? So whatever was already a trajectory prior to the pandemic just got a kick in the pants, you know, to get there faster.
You know, to punctuate that point, I talked to a CIO of West Coast Healthcare Institution. He says, you know, we've been farting around with telemedicine for 20 years. Beginning of the year, we were 2% outpatient in telemedicine.
Yeah.
In 3 months, we went to 50%. He says, will we stay there? He says, I doubt it, but we won't go back to 2%.
No, we're going to talk about work from home in a minute, what that means. And I think some of the telemedicine experience, we're getting to the age where we do a lot of medical visits, some of them are great. You don't have to get up and go to the doctor's office and so on, but they call it a physical for a reason, right? It's hard to have a virtual physical, right? If you get a physical, you need a doctor to actually put his hands on you. So I don't think everything can be done.
I don't know, Frank. We're moving to so much self-service. We probably will need to.
All right. Let's see what else we got here. Cloud budgets increasing. The increases are accelerating. We did see more increasing than decreasing back in April and May. That's gone even farther now. Much of the cloud spending is report for those remote workers and an increase in e-commerce transaction volume. I spoke to one back in May. I spoke to one company that is in the gardening business. They do seeds and gardening plants, supplies, and so on. And he said, we can't keep up with the demand. He said, most of our customers are in, the median age of our customers is 55, like you and me, old people, right? They want to get out of the house. They're clammed up. They want to get outside, get in the fresh air. He said, our e-commerce business is booming. We can't even keep up with it. So, fortunately they were already there. So just a matter of ramping it up, but you're supporting more e-commerce volume. You're going to have to spend more on the cloud.
I think SAP saw its Commerce Cloud volumes just explode. So anyone who has e-commerce capability saw increased demand.
Okay, so now working from home. So we added a question this time. We asked the survey respondents 3 things. What percentage of this is for IT employees, not general employee population. What percentage of your IT employees were working from home 100%? Not this, 1 day a week stuff, right? How many of them were fully remote workers before the pandemic? How many are fully remote now? And how many do you expect will be after the pandemic is over? So we didn't even bother to plot that middle question because it pretty much would pin the needle at 100%. So we left that out here. But before the pandemic, at the median, only 3% of IT workers were working from home 100% of the time. Our survey respondents now expect that to be 50%, at the median, 50% of their IT workers to be working 100% from home after the pandemic. So it's going to become, it's a way of life now, but it's not going to go back. We're not going back to offices.
Frank, did you ask about non-IT workers? Because
we did not. No, we maybe we should have, but we did not. And of course, as you know, that's going to vary a lot depending on the type of organization. Manufacturing companies have got to.
Yeah, exactly. So on.
But like this respondent said, we're moving 100%, almost 100%. Why waste money on office space? We're going to reduce our footprint. We'll still have a time to get together, but everybody's happier working from home. There's a lot of comments like that, right? So this, again, there's already, and we saw this trend. We've been tracking the telecommuting trend since the mid-2000s. And we just published a report prior to the pandemic that saw a big uptick in telecommuting even before the pandemic. Well, again, this is another trend that was already taking place. It's just increased as a result of the pandemic. It's another trend that just the trajectory was the same, it just accelerated. That's it, Vinnie. It's an excerpt.
Frank, thank you. This is great. And maybe before you start next year's survey,
yeah,
we should do some sharing. I may be able to add to your survey because I've seen some patterns, some very interesting patterns myself.
Well, I should have said, in addition to our spring survey, we have kind of a preliminary survey that we're going to start now to get kind of the outlook for the next coming year. So we're actually going to have another checkpoint that we'll release probably in December. So that'll give us, I forgot about that. That'll give us another look at the trajectory in the IT spending. So let's get together on that and we can give you a preview on where we see things going.
Fantastic.
Always good to talk to you.
This is, like you say, especially this slide, the acceleration is dramatic. This is like getting in a Ferrari.